Hello, the few that are left here in sociology. So I hope everything's going well. We're going to start the next material. Uh, we're finished with deviance. Obviously, I wish I could have done more with that. Wish I could have dove into that a little bit more. Hang on one second. I realize the blind behind me is blinding. So we're going to do this so that you guys can actually see me. All right. But we're going to move on to social stratification. And it'll be pretty clear here shortly of what that actually is. So let's just move on to this first slide. So what is social stratification? The ranking of people or groups according to their unequal access to scarce resources. So we're talking about the ability, okay, or let me start that over. We're ranking people. Think of a pyramid, all right, and we're ranking people by you're towards the top based off of your access to resources. Not all of these are as scarce as others. They throw the term out there with scarce resources, but some a little more scarce than others. But within society. But let's go to what are those resources? Money. Okay. If you think of the social pyramid, that is put together by how much money people make. All right. So we're going to talk about income and wealth here, because that resource in itself in our society lends you to get a lot of other things also. And the debatable part would be insufficient amount to satisfy the need or the demand. Is there enough money in the world without, just printing money? But if there's enough money right now, if it stopped, is there enough to spread around to satisfy need or demand? And I'm not promoting spreading everybody, but what I'm talking about is there enough out there in terms of it being a scarce resource? So that's a different discussion. But basically, let's get back to the basics here. Social stratification is the social pyramid. At the top, you have basically those that are rich. You've heard of the top 1%. Okay. That's at the top, absolute top of the pyramid. And the way that works is it goes down. Some of the percentages increase. There are bigger ones depending on where you're at, but that's what we're going to take a look at. So the most important resources that we're going to talk about, income and wealth, and I'll tell you the difference between the two because they're oftentimes grouped together, which they can be grouped together, but they are different. And then power and prestige. What lends someone to have power in our society and what lends them to have prestige? So let's look at this pyramid. All right. And this one, if you go out and you look at the U.S. social pyramid, you're going to get numbers somewhat similar to this. Sometimes you have people that will group maybe a couple of the sections together, but as a whole, this is pretty close to if you were to break it up into 6 sections. That upper class is that top 1%, all right? And then you'll see upper middle working being 60% of individuals, and then the working poor and the underclass and what that looks like. All right. Now, what we're talking about is 1% of the population. Obviously not 1% of the wealth, 30% of the wealth. We're talking about the upper class is 1% of the population. The underclass is 12% of the population. So you got to think 1 in 4 people based off looking at this number. So if you combine working poor and underclass together, that means 1 out of 4 people are either in the working poor or underclass. And then you're going to have 60% of individuals in middle class and working class. And then you get into that top 15% in the upper middle and upper class. And we'll talk about what those numbers look at. Like that'll be a part of what your assignment is to group with this is how much do you make to get yourself into the 1%? How much are you making annually to get into the working class? What is that? All right. So this brings up something we always fall back on, the original ideas from chapter 1 of the intro of the individuals that played a role with this. And we're going to talk about Marxism, all right, and the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. So when looking at this Marxist theory, the bourgeoisie, think if somebody says something, so somebody brought this up last year, and I said, I have no idea. They said, is the term bougie or bougie, is that come from bourgeoisie? I said, it very well may. I have no idea. I haven't put that much attention into that term, but okay. The bourgeoisie, that's the class that owns the means of production. All right. So they own factories, they own land, they have access to cash, and probably more of it than most. Okay. And the proletariat, that is the working class. It's the class that labors without owning the means of production. So they work and they own some things, but they don't actually own the means of production. So those are your working class individuals. And if you've never looked at Marxist theory, he suggests that the bourgeoisie would disappear. And it says, why? Why would the bourgeoisie disappear? He said, essentially, the numbers wouldn't work where the proletariat is going to be so many of the people because the bourgeoisie would own the means of productions, and the proletariat would eventually rise up and overthrow the bourgeoisie. And he predicted you would then have a classless society. All right. So Marxist theory it gets thrown out there a lot, like times that it failed. For the most part, it's only been used for manipulation more than anything. So if you think of when Germany was struggling, when Russia was struggling, the idea of, hey, I'm here for the proletariat and I'm going to work for you, and we're basically going to go after the bourgeoisie, that's a great way to get people, especially if it's in the masses, to follow you. If I tell you I'm going to put more food on your plate and give you more power in a society, people are going to listen, okay? And people are going to adopt that idea and think that something's good about it. Now, we know in like the Russian Revolution and if you go through Nazi Germany and all of those things, this did not always come to fruition, and we never really saw this actually put into place and actually work, all right? So let's move on here. And we're going to talk about, so when we talk about the resources and separating the two, we're going to talk about income and wealth. And what's the difference between them? Income is essentially your paycheck, how much you make, how much money you receive over a specific time period as a worker. And then wealth doesn't only encompass your paycheck and how much you make, but it talks about all the resources that you own. So if you own property or anything, your value, like if you have a stock market portfolio, all of these things, are you own a boat, you own a car, everything, that is wealth. So it's what you own, including money. All right. Hopefully that makes sense, the difference between those two. So here's where we get into the debate. I'm not taking a stance here. I'm just throwing some numbers out there, and then for you guys to take a look at it and tell me what you think. All right, where it says the richest 1% of Americans own 34.6 of the income, give or take. I think I put those numbers together 1 to 2 years ago as I look at that and try to remember when I did it. It wasn't too long ago. All right, and if you take in the next top 5%, own 62% of the actual income. And so the debate always goes, is this an actual problem? All right, where you have a top heavy, not necessarily the amount of people, but the amount of cash that is in a smaller amount, with the masses of the individuals not making as much. So it's a big debate in terms of what that should look like. Should everybody have equal? Absolutely not. All right. So does this bring about an issue? If it does, why do you think that? And then how would you go about fixing it if you think that's a problem? And you may not think that it's an actual problem. So it'll be interesting to take a look at. And this will be a question that'll be on your guys's sheet that you have to go with these notes. All right. So when you do this, take a look at it and let me know what you think. All right. Just be ready to back up whatever your belief is on this. Prestige. What is prestige? Let's just jump down to the bottom pictures. Two of those are the same person. I got corrected a couple years ago. Said that is not the same person. I said they said that one's Hannah Montana, one's Miley Cyrus. I was like, well, you get what I'm saying. So anyway, most of you know who the bottom two are. All right, the bottom left. I'm going to go out on a limb and say none of you know who that individual is. But if you look at the lab coat, you can see that he probably involved in science or medicine of some sort. And he is a top researcher on cancer. So that's what that is. Now, what are we talking about here? Prestige, recognition, respect, and admiration attached to social positions. All right. That's not to say that that first individual, when you find out who that is, there's a lot of respect and admiration for what he's doing. The recognition piece, that's the bottom two. You might not respect or admire anything that she does, but you recognize her. Um, and when they rank, if they actually rank positions in America by jobs, and typically doctor has always been number one. It is not a teacher. So actually, teachers usually around 10-ish. Okay, so there are lists that are composed where they ask people, how much prestige is attached to this job, and usually medical field is towards the top. So now, how do you get this? How are you recognized? In our society, recognition is easy. All right, in terms of like how is she recognized? Well, musician, whatever. She was actress. She was involved in many different things, and we put our faces in front of that. How do you get respect? You get respect typically by doing something that people admire. So you might admire what she does. You might admire what somebody else does. Okay, anybody in that realm of entertainment. All right, and something you might recognize but not respect. And in that admiration, a piece that's attached to these positions. Okay, think about the job you want to get into. Let's say that you want to be a fireman. All right. Typically, there's going to be a lot of respect and admiration to somebody who is a fireman. Police officer, sometimes. Actually, that's close to teacher. That gets like a 60-some percent prestige ranking, meaning like 62% recognize it as an admirable job. Sorry. So hopefully you get the idea of what prestige is. And the last one, which is not on here. I'm going to have to skip. I forgot where's power. Here it is. Okay. So power, when we obviously we understand what power is, but where does power come from? You got to be kidding me. All right, I'll just go back to this. Sorry, that's my fault, guys. I don't have power on there, but we understand what power is within our society. And how do you get power in our society? Where does that come from? Okay, power typically comes from you're able to make decisions and get people to do what you want. All right, where does that oftentimes come from? If you have money, do you have power in our society? It helps. It definitely helps. You can't say it doesn't. Okay. There's power within different structures too, because you don't have to be rich to have power. Like, let's say that you serve on the Erie County Commission, or you serve on the Sandusky City Commission. They don't get paid a lot of money for doing that, but there's a power dimension to what they're doing. Okay. Now, if you control capital or money, do you control power? That becomes a big part of the conversation in our society. That those that control the capital do control the power. And can people expand their power? And how do you expand your power in our society? Do you do it by getting more money? Or do you do it by changing positions? All right. And the last question I kind of already answered. Can you exercise power without being wealthy? You absolutely can. Okay. You can sometimes prestige, the resource of prestige can also help you wield power, as if somebody respects you and admires you and there's recognition for what you're doing, they're more liable to kind of answer to some of the things that you say. All right. But usually this conversation is driven behind the idea of those that control capital control the power. Is that how it is in our society? And we'll get to that a little bit further when talking about social stratification. So I've got to go back and show you what you guys are going to do, because I'm going to explain this to you. It says make a social pyramid. You guys aren't going to make a social pyramid. I used to have you guys draw one up, and then we'd hang them around the room so that you had access to them. You're just going to use the document that I gave you, and you're going to punch in this stuff uh, to fill it out. I'm going to give you 6 boxes. Make sure you at least fill out 5, because you might find a social pyramid out there. You might find some information that breaks it down to 5 as opposed to 6. That's okay. I just don't want you only doing, oh, mine only had 3 categories for the social pyramid. So when I'm talking about this, what do I mean by the social pyramid? Remember what I just showed you. You're going to have upper class, lower class, working class. You're going to have those. That's the sections I'm talking about. All right. So what must be in there? What is the income range for that class? So let's say that you're doing the 1% is the one that you're on. Well, what is the starting wage for to be considered in the top 1%? Is it 125,000? Is it 250,000? Is it $1 million? What is that? If it's the working poor, what's the range? Is it 17,000 to 35,000? What is the range of the income for those that are in that? Second one, percentage of people in each class. So if we know it's top 1%, and that's how yours is labeled too, then it would be 1%. All right, and I want you to find the most updated statistics for this. Is working poor still around 12, 13%? What is the current percentage? Typical jobs in each class, I said to find at least 4. So like to be in the working poor, all right, there are not going to be a lot of jobs that require a doctor is not going to be in the working poor. He's going to be in a different class. Somebody who works the front gate at Cedar Point as their job, not as a summer job, they might be considered possibly in the working poor for the wages that they would make. Number 4, any extra characteristics that you may find. So what am I looking for here? They might attach like typical education levels, all right, or anything that they'll talk about, like maybe in the top ones, maybe they're heirs. So there's these different things, how much schooling that they went to, that's the education level. So what are these extra characteristics that it'll be pretty clear what I'm talking about when you start to look these up. Okay, and I want you to add that into that 4th box there. All right, so hopefully this clears up what you need to do. You can ignore the make a social pyramid. You're just going to be filling out the form that I've attached to this. All right, and then when we're done with this, we'll go a little bit further into something else. So take care, guys.